My name is Kenneth Bailey, and this is Another City is Possible. Where we ask, what does it mean to create more just and vibrant cities?
Mending everything, not even just divides.
Now living in walkable places is a privilege, and it shouldn't be.
It starts from the point of listening.
I really feel that this is going to happen on a local level and a regional level.
Engaging with people who are different and with ideas that are different so they can empathize.
In this episode, we talk with Melisa Sanders. With Melisa's interview, she really focuses on reimagining the city, starting with really reimagining the block and using the block as the primary site of thinking what a city might build up to be. For her, the block is the beginning of reimagining the city. The vibe was definitely more resident engagement, resident support, where neighbors support neighbors to build their blocks one by one. And this conversation gave me a lot to think about in terms of neighbors rethinking the block. Let's take a listen. That flew by.
It did, yeah. Are we free-flowing a little bit on this? Yeah.
Here we go.
Here we go.
Here we go. Welcome to the last installment of Another City is Possible at Circus of Life at Counterpublic. And we get to close this out with Melisa Sanders, who also works at Counterpublic, but is also an architect, and is also a St. Louisan, and is also my homegirl.
Yeah. Absolutely.
So I'm so excited to be closing this out with you.
Yeah.
And I want to start with what interests you in St. Louis or in cities or in the urban realm, however you want to take it.
Sure. So I'm going to do something weird.
I love it.
Because, no, I was preparing for this conversation, and I was thinking, and I was like trying to figure out how to contextualize what I was like feeling in the moment. And this morning when I was getting ready, I was listening to Open Mike Eagle.
I love it.
And there's a beautiful song that he has, and so I was like, this is the contextualizing of my thing. So I'm not a singer, so I'm not going to sing it. But it's my friends are superheroes. None of us have very much money though. They wear the same underwear as billionaires. None of us have very much money though. I know hustlers, drug dealers, beat makers, bloggers, egomaniacal authors and sculptors. Some of them talk to the animals, but none of that matters when people are hungry.
Wow.
So that's framing for me right now.
I love it.
So for me, the built world, the way that I look at it is how do we resource people directly into the needs that they have so that we can think about more creative futures and vibrant futures. I think we have to start need first. But what interests me about the built environment, vibrancy, people, culture, identity of space, how places retain memory, and understanding how to work with that memory.
And so would you say a little bit about your practice in the built environment?
Yeah, absolutely. So I have a firm here called Black Arc. It's an architecture, urban design practice, and we work primarily with community as partner. So anytime we enter a space, we always look for the people who are already doing and building and being, because we believe that is the expertise. There's the expertise that we bring as designers, but there's so much lived knowledge, and there's so many people who are already building, who are already designing, who are already doing the things that you would think an architect or an urban designer does, but they don't do it in the formalized way. They didn't go to a Washington University to do that work. But we believe very much in like that knowledge has so much power to create and to perpetuate the things that we want to perpetuate in the neighborhoods that we're working in. So we do a lot of neighborhood planning, neighborhood identity work, but always through the lens of we are working with community as partner and as paid members of our team.
I'm asking everybody to talk about a divide either here in the city or in cities in general, that is their personal pet peeve?
Sure.
And do you have one? And if so, what is it?
Yeah. Oh, I have some. Lifelong St. Louisan. And, there's the Del Mar divide that we talk about, this sort of divide between all of the metrics, racially, social, economic, all of those things. But something that peeves me right now is sort of this institution to people divide that sometimes happens.
Say more.
And for me, it's been extractiveness. So what does it mean for people to leverage the power and culture of places for their own benefit? And so that, for me, has been a current peeve, is like seeing people being extractive from people who are already not getting the same resources that others are. Yeah.
I'm trying to picture the institution and people divide.
Sure.
How would you characterize it? I understand the extraction.
Yeah.
But like if you walked us through
Yeah.
what that divide looks and feels like for you.
Yeah, absolutely. It's visibility, like who gets platformed, who gets to be able to speak on the behalf of St. Louis, who gets to be considered the doers or the makers in those spaces. Who gets the money, who gets the power, who gets privilege, who gets the development. We see that especially St. Louis now in post-tornado world. What does it mean to redevelop in a city that has already had these systems that have perpetuated certain things within the built environment, and now we're trying to repair those things, but are we actually addressing the lived experience of people that happened before even the tornado? So seeing a lot of that right now and realizing that there are people making decisions for people who are not at the table, who do not experience it on any sort of direct level.
I'm wondering, before I go to that question, I want to come back to your thinking about the division between the institution and the individual in context of this conversation about St. Louis.
Sure.
And I'm wondering, how do you see that sort of playing itself out spatially?
That's true.
In terms of the built environment?
Sure. Spatially, it is maybe agency, the ability to design for and design your own space. I'm thinking directly of immediately post-tornado, we were having a conversation.
And for people that don't know what you're talking about.
Oh, yes. So St. Louis.
The tornado.
Yeah, the tornado, an EF3 tornado came through St. Louis and hit a part of the city that already had been devastated through legacies of redlining and so places really north of Del Mar when we talk about the Del Mar divide. So that happened in May, and people are still without roofs and heat and homes. Many people didn't have house or homeowners insurance or things like that because that's the way that properties have been devalued within the city anyway. So really the tornado came in and just exasperated a system that was already broken in a lot of ways.
And what you were saying about institutions and individuals is that the way in which the divide between institutions and individuals is playing out is sort of determining whose imaginary is getting platformed for the future of the city.
Exactly. Yeah. Whose imaginary gets platformed, who gets to do the rebuilding. Concretely, but also imagining wise, how do we conceptualize a new space? Who gets invited to do that? And I'm thinking, I think very deeply about that. We had this conversation with elders in North St. Louis. And we were talking actually around art. It was actually facilitated for Counterpublic. So we were talking about how do you want to engage with art? How do you want art to exist within your community? But it actually happened a few days after the tornado had hit. So they were all very emotions were high in that moment. And as we're talking about this, they're also talking about what why can't we have the resources that we need to rebuild our own spaces? Right now, we know that there's going to be construction companies and developers and things that are going to come in to repair, and that money is going to immediately go out of our community. If you could just give us the money to rebuild our own spaces, we would do that, and we could keep it, and we could retain it. And I was like, that's so interesting, because St. Louis right now is spending a lot of money on asking people to theorize on what a new St. Louis could look like, because we don't believe, or certain people in St. Louis don't believe, that there's enough knowledge that exists here already to design the spaces that we're in. And that's disheartening, really.
I guess one of the cases I'm trying to think through or make is that there's a role for art in spatial justice.
Yeah.
And I'm wondering concretely, can you see a role for social practice in lifting up? I mean, I don't even want to put that frame on it. Like, how might, I guess the question might be, like, given this particular set of conditions,
Sure.
how might socially engaged art
Yeah.
arc towards spatial justice, or help us arc towards spatial justice and sort of equity in design in this context? If you see it being possible, you might be like, I don't think that it's possible right now.
I think it's possible. I think it's possible if we maybe distill it down to the skill sets too. So what is art? It's making, it's creating, it's crafting, it's narrating, giving voice to. How can we give people those skills and agency to be able to engage with that, especially in a moment of need or in a moment of crisis? And I think that it can. I think it has historically done amazing things on how do we relay how people are feeling and how people are experiencing a place through art, whether that's visual or concrete. But it's also, we have to be able to resource those skills and that agency back to people who feel voiceless at a moment.
What do you think that would look like concretely?
Concretely, yeah. So right now, I'm working on a project where I'm really thinking about, like, what does it mean to rebuild and to have the knowledge of rebuilding. I think a lot of that has maybe been lost to where there's not as much embedded in the community where people know how to, like, build things with their hands or repair their own roofs or those sorts of things. And I think that there's these technical skills that are a part of it, and then there's these sort of learned skills, and, like, we should be doing more to resource people into those learned skills, because we already know that the system is not going to be one where they can go out and get a construction loan and do whatever. But, like, if you know that your neighbor can build a roof, can you tap on that as sort of the shared experience? And so for me, I've been working on what does it look like for me to sit in my role as GC and as an architect and be able to help people rebuild as the entity that sort of helps them, like, understand those skills.
And what would you see, like, the role of this world? You're in that world and you're in this world.
Sure.
What do you see the role of this world in helping to achieve spatial justice? If you think about Counterpublic or sort of biennales and the socially engaged art world as an institution.
Sure. How I've described it with my team with Counterpublic has been like we're gophers, kind of. We get to pop our little heads out. We get to, like, we understand this climate and the space that we're in, and we are privileged enough to be able to, like, stick our head out and see what are other people doing, what are people imagining, what are people doing that's creative. And then it's our goal is to bring that back down to those who are in the midst of those things. Not everyone has that privilege to be able to think creatively or to see new ideas or new spaces. And so, like, that is our role. We get to go up, we get to gather, we get to bring it back down, and we get to hopefully energize more gophers to be able to do that work. Gophers is a weird metaphor, but I have to turn into an animal, I guess.
And last, anything else you want to say about urbanism, the role of art in bridging divides, maybe the larger context of what's going on politically and how it's going to affect the divides we are currently experiencing.
Sure.
Just last words.
Last words, yeah. Yeah, being careful, understanding who is at every table that you're sitting at and who should be there, who's missing. I think that's our role, is to like be able to make that examination. At least in my space, that's my role. Resourcing need first has been like a big part of it. It's like not showing up places empty-handed. If I'm going into a situation that people have already expressed a need, I can't go in there and think that I'm going to be creative on this side unless I address the situation that we're in. And I think that's one of the things we just have to be really careful about, is like, what are the ways in which we create a dialogue or an exchange instead of just being someone who is feeding from and pulling from? How do we refill other people's cup? And St. Louis, unfortunately, sometimes doesn't do that well, but I think that there are a lot of people who do that well in St. Louis that I'm happy to work with. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
So for this last talk, we thought we'd open it up to a little bit of Q&A, and think about this as not just the Q&A for us, but it could be observations or questions from the entire series. You might have a question for us, or you might just have something to say about the entire thing. So we're going to open it up. Take about 2 or 3 before we close it out.
And then I'm also wondering about, you talked about sharing resources.
Yeah. I'm thinking about the context in which we were talking about this. So I'm an educator too. I teach at WashU in the architecture department. And what does it look like in sort of the academic world to like teach these vantage points? And so there's sort of 2 minds that I'm in when I'm thinking about this and how do you relay this back. And one is this level of expertise. So for my students, I'm like, be really good at what you do. I get students all the time who are asking like, oh, I don't want to do this studio project because there's all these social issues that I want to address first. And I'm like, I wouldn't put you in the community because you don't even know what you're talking. You don't even know how to design yet. You don't know how to draw a line. Okay. And what I'm like, but what is a powerful tool is being really good at what you can do, because people who are in socially complex situations deserve good design. They deserve beauty, they deserve art, they deserve expertise. And so like that is something that you should absolutely be working towards, so that that can be your voice at the table. The other part of it is like understanding, when I talk about understanding who's not at the table, we design for invisible clients is what I call it. And invisible clients are, for me, those who are most impacted but least prioritized in the design process. And so those are the people that may not ever be at that design table with you, but you have to think about their needs within this design process. And that is something that you can do and have agency to do. And that's also a way of, you can be an activist in that way, where you can subvert a system and embed in it all of these sort of little Easter eggs that benefit other people. I think like there's one particular project that I was working on, and it was an art-based project. It was a public art project, which was new for me at the time, and they wanted to redesign a bus stop. And I was brought in on the project to mainly do the architectural drawings, and they had done a round of community engagement. And I was looking at the community engagement that they had done, and the demographics were all white, retiree-aged folks. And I was like, what is going on here? Well, apparently all of their community engagement had happened during the day, 9 to 5 hours. It was like something at noon on a Wednesday. Who's available noon on a Wednesday? Not anyone with a family, not anyone whatever. But also I was like, have you talked to anybody who rides the bus? And they were like, oh, no. well, how would we even do that? And I'm like, you sit in the bus stop. Like, just the easiest question. But they felt like they had done, they were like, well, we don't have time. And I was like, well, give me 90 days. I was like, give me 90 days. And I will find every moment that and so that's what we did. We sat in the bus stop. We found the times that the most riders were there. So commute in the morning, commute in the evening, had so many informal conversations. Also experienced this bus stop, which really sucked. It was really dark. And so I was like, oh, this is not a great experience myself. Lots of drama happened in that bus stop. But also then we were talking to kids. We were talking to families. All of a sudden, 90 days, we had quadrupled the amount of people who had responded to this engagement, but also we changed all of the demographics. So all of a sudden it was reflective of commuters, of people at different income levels. And then all of that went into designing a space that welcomed bus riders as community. And then now the space is used, people sit in the bus stop. They sit in the bus stop just to hang out in the park because the bus stop is that. And now also it's very fun. Someone painted a mural of the neighborhood and it had the bus stop in the mural. Like, where are you painting bus stops and murals? But like, that is the ability to understand who is missing from a conversation and then using that and building a toolkit around that to make a better design, to make it more enriching and inclusive of other people. And then I mean, the client in that case did not care about the bus riders, but I cared about the bus riders. And so I could hide good design, inside of something that was aesthetically pleasing to an end user who could care less about the other side. So.
Wow.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
One more?
Yeah.
So I'm wondering about we had talked about this, like what socially engaged artists can do, but I'm also wondering about your viewpoint as an architect, and that built environments can actually facilitate these, like this bridging of the divide, or like different interactions or new ways of being together. So I'm wondering, like, if you had just infinite money and like there were no restrictions, is there something that you would want to create or design
if I had infinite money, well, I want to pay off everybody's mortgages, but no, I think it's the thing that I'm working on right now. So for me, it's understanding what does it mean to stabilize a block. St. Louis is really good about thinking about an individual building. So there's all these resources and things that you can do to help you stabilize your house. It's also really good at what is neighborhood planning. So there's a lot of neighborhood planning efforts that are happening. St. Louis has 79 neighborhoods. For those who I know, all of them have their own identities and sort of aesthetics to them. And so there's a neighborhood planning effort that's happening citywide. But for most people to plan 30 years out, they're but what's step one? How do we get from here to this idealized 30 years from now? And that's such a leap for people. And so I've been well, what is an ideal sort of situation? And for me, it's the block, because the block can create density. And it's also the lines of communication of I can talk to someone down the street from me. I might not be able to talk to someone who's 3 blocks over, but I can talk to someone who literally shares a space that I'm within. And we also have to share so many systems. We have to share sidewalks, we have to share parking issues, we have to deal with, things like water management, whose basements flood on our road, that sort of thing. And so then understanding that as scales. In St. Louis, we have these really interesting mixes of blocks, especially in North City, where we might have on the same block homeowners, renters, multifamilies. Then we have vacant buildings that are LRA owned, vacant lots that have buildings on them. And then we have LRA or vacant lots.
What's an LRA?
LRA, Land Revitalization Authority, basically owned by the city.
Okay.
City owned land that is vacant, that has nothing on it. St. Louis has a lot of fragmentation. So there's a lot of neighborhoods that the buildings have been taken down, and you can see blocks that have one house left on them, and it's just completely, everything else is gone. But you might have these blocks that have these mixtures. And it's like, if we were to stabilize a block, we have to start with the people who are still there and resource them back into good quality lives. So then it's like, let's start there. What if we are teaching people how to share those skills, maybe build together, maybe drywall together, maybe like repair their plaster together, sort of thing. And if they want to take that into a path where they're like, actually, I'm going to be a general contractor now, cool. Or I just know how to do this for myself and for my community members. I think that's a really interesting thing. And then it also kind of subverts the system of what we have in St. Louis, which is property devaluation and not being able to get loans and those sorts of things. So you start phase 1 of stabilizing people where they are. Then phase 2 becomes like, well, let's think about these vacant buildings, because that requires a little more technical skill, but also
probably skill to translate with the city, right?
Exactly, absolutely. And it's part of a bigger system that maybe lies outside of that block. And then we can think about, like, what does it mean to renovate those things and turn them back into affordable housing and all of that. And like, what happens if you sell that building? Does that go back to the block? You know, like, what does that look like? And then third phase would be infill, you know, like, then the last phase is like, how do we plug in the homes? But also, as a designer, like, this is where my expertise comes in. It's like, we should not be rebuilding this the same that we are. If we already know that infrastructure in St. Louis is failing at different levels, whether that's the sewer system, whether that's, you know, electrical, all these sorts of things, then why would we go back in with the same thing? We can all of a sudden start really thinking critically about, what does it mean to renovate with energy efficiency in mind? What does it mean to take a vacant lot and turn it into solar? What does it mean to think about water management at a block level? What if we all get rid of our front yards and they become productive landscapes? Like, we can reimagine at a block, and that density, I think, is enough to be like, I am building a community, you know, here, and now that energy reverberates to the next block, to the next block, to the next block, and then we're building a future and not just like planning for a future. I think St. Louis has a big history of, like, we love to map, we love to plan, we don't like to do a ton. You know?
And with that, that was amazing. Thank you. Thank you, guys. And that concludes Another City is Possible. Thanks for listening. We recorded these conversations at Counterpublic's Circus of Life on November 3rd, 2025, and the theme for these conversations was Bridging Divides. I'd like to thank Counterpublic and Circus of Life for having us do this series of Another City is Possible. I'd like to give a special thanks to Crystal B for helping us with this series. And to listen, you can go to Design Studio for Social Intervention, ds4si.org, and counterpublic.org.